Before we begin, thank you so much for being here and supporting the channel. Every like, every share, and every subscription truly means a lot to me. Your support is a huge source of encouragement, and it helps me keep bringing more stories like this to you. So if you enjoy this kind of story, please subscribe, like, and share. Now let's begin. Concord Spindle was the main diplomatic station of the Galaxy Council, a ring of white metal and old treaties circling a dead blue star 3 jumps from Earth. Inside the central deliberation hall, Corinne Hale stood behind the glass partition reserved for non-member witnesses and kept both hands flat on the rail until the tremor in her fingers passed. She was there because the Council had accused Earth of turning relief work into influence. If she failed, the Council could freeze Earth's supply lanes, strip civilians from Earth protection zones, and break the settlements she had spent 6 years keeping alive. Corinne Hale served as the civilian logistics commander for the Earth Reconstruction Authority, though the title sounded cleaner than the work. Her real job was grain, medicine routes, oxygen filters, prosthetic shipments, water recyclers, child housing, burial records, and the quiet math of how many damaged people a settlement could hold before it started breaking too. The Council had brought her here as the public face of a system some species had begun calling the human shelter grid. The phrase was already being sharpened into a weapon. A soft chime moved through the chamber. A silver line lit around the base of her platform. Selkavor spoke first. Commander Corinne Hale of Earth Reconstruction Authority, confirm identity and function for the record. Corinne lifted her chin. Corinne Hale. Civilian Logistics Command, Earth Reconstruction Authority. I oversee post-war resettlement networks, supply allocation, medical routing, and cross-species shelter support in Earth-administered reconstruction zones. Earth-administered, Selka repeated. Not Earth-assisted. We administer the zones we fund, secure, and maintain. A murmur moved through the upper tiers. Corinne heard the note inside it at once too firm, too human, too willing to sound like ownership. Selka touched a control strip. A field of light rose over the center floor and spread into maps, numbers, and migration routes in pale blue bands. This hearing concerns the rapid movement of liberated civilian populations from coalition redistribution channels into settlements operating under Earth's standards of housing, food rights, injury care, and non-productive support, Selka said. Several member states have petitioned this council to review whether Earth has used reconstruction policy to cultivate political dependency. Political dependency. A cleaner phrase for the same accusation. Corinne forced herself to breathe slowly. In the last 9 days, her team had modeled 28 possible directions for the hearing, and this one was near the top. Not the worst. The worst version included treason language and military escorts. Selka continued. Do you understand the charge before you? I understand the wording, Corinne said. I reject the premise. Terrian Sol leaned forward on the dais. He came from the Hesker Systems, a cluster of rich logistics worlds that had prospered during the war by selling fleet support to both defense coalitions and evacuation councils. He had the heavy calm of a man used to deciding how long other people were worth feeding. You may reject it later, he said. For now, we will establish facts. Corinne's counsel, a quiet Earth legal officer named Jun Sato, did not rise. He only touched 2 fingers to the edge of their table, the signal they had agreed on. Let them define too much. Let them overreach. Make them own their framing. To the public eye, it looked simple. Earth had offered aid had created loyalty, and loyalty had created political reach. To Corinne, the missing data was louder than the visible kind. No one on the screens mentioned that Earth districts took the elderly, the permanently injured, children without stable households, and species whose care cost more than average. The maps were full of movement and empty of meaning. During a pause, Selka turned toward her. Commander Hale, did Earth establish independent humanitarian corridors outside standard redistribution? Grids in the Kepri Vale, the Ras-9 break zone, and the Oran Belt? Yes. Did those corridors carry civilians who had not yet been approved for regional placement by the Bureau of Population Recovery? Yes. Terrian Sol tapped his panel. Then Earth acted outside standard post-war coordination. We acted before standard coordination became a death queue, Corinne said. The chamber stirred. Jun Sato did not move. Good, she thought. Let them hear that early. Selka's expression barely changed. You will restrain yourself to direct answers. No, Corinne said, then softened it before Earth's delegation could flinch. Not if the question removes the reason we acted. Selka folded her hands. Then explained the reason. The redistribution system, Corinne said, sorted people faster than it housed them. It classified urgency faster than it delivered care. It could move healthy adults through temporary holding. It could not move mixed dependency groups through long recovery at the speed your projections promised. She let one beat pass before finishing. So the people who waited longest were the ones least able to survive waiting. Which people? Selka asked. The elderly. The injured. Children without intact households. Civilian workers with chronic damage. Species with medical burdens that increased resettlement costs. Anyone who turned a clean projection into a long one. Terrian Sol's voice hardened. You are describing a system under wartime strain. I am describing a pattern that continued after the shooting stopped. A second chime marked the transition into evidentiary submission. Corinne had known it was coming, but she had not expected the first display to hit as hard as it did. A new set of records rose into the chamber. Transport logs, corridor authorizations, petition requests, and at the center, magnified in red, her own clearance stamp from 15 months earlier. It approved off-grid transfer from a holding ring above Laven Tor to Earth-administered Settlement 14 on New Carthage. Terrian Sol spoke as though he had handed the chamber a confession. This authorization moved 8,421 civilians from Coalition holding into an Earth district without final placement review. Of those, 7,000 later filed permanent residence petitions under Earth's civil administration. Do you deny signing this? No. Do you deny that your signature initiated a transfer which resulted in mass retention of liberated populations under Earth control? I deny your use of the word mass as if they were cargo. I deny your use of the word control as if they were property. And I deny the idea that they were owed back to systems that had no place for them. The translation panels flickered as multiple language trees reprocessed her last line. Selka let the silence stretch before speaking again. Commander Hale, are you claiming the member systems represented here did not want their own displaced populations returned? Corinne looked at the maps, then at the rows of delegates, then back at Selka. I am claiming many systems wanted them processed. That is not the same thing. The old Marine in the Earth Tier lowered his gaze. Jun Sato finally rose. High Adjudicator, he said, Earth requests that all comparative mortality tables be expanded to include dependency class and long-term housing denial rates. Terrian Sol cut in before Selka could answer. Denied. That would shift scope from Earth conduct to coalition planning doctrine. Jun's face remained polite. That is because coalition planning doctrine is the reason Earth conduct happened. The chamber rustled again. Corinne kept still, but a pulse had begun to beat behind her eyes. Good. It was out in the open now. At the rear of the hall, one of her station aides slipped through a side access lane and took position behind the Earth table. He did not look up. He set a wafer-thin data strip beside Jun Sato's hand and left. Jun touched the strip once, and his expression changed by a fraction. Corinne knew that look. Something new. Something dangerous. When the session paused for inter-council review, Jun passed the strip to her under cover of folding his notes. She kept her eyes on the dais while reading the embedded line across her wrist display. Records package in use is filtered. Omitted variables match Bureau low-yield classifications. Source internal. Do not trust timing. No signature. No origin tag. But the syntax felt familiar, clipped and careful. One of her old audit analysts, perhaps. Someone still inside a system that had already decided Earth's care model needed to be stopped before it became contagious. The hearing resumed under higher light. Selka announced that the council would hear witness testimony in the next phase. Corinne knew that was bad. Witnesses in public chambers were not brought in to clarify. They were brought in to harden a story. She looked up at the seal of the council again, the 7 linked orbits hanging above the dais. Mutual dependence, it said. On Concord Spindle, under the old gold light, Corinne already understood the truth. This was not a routine hearing about logistics. It was a warning shot at the idea that human standards of care might spread farther than human borders. And if she failed here, the people who would pay first were the ones no one else had wanted badly enough to count. Jun Sato joined her with a slate of hearing updates and set it on the rail between them. We have the afternoon witness list. Corinne took one look at the names and felt her stomach tighten. That soon. They want momentum. That means they think the first phase landed. Corinne handed the slate back. Who approved distribution? The hearing office. That is not an answer. No, June said. It is the only one they will give us. She turned away from the glass and paced once across the narrow chamber. The room was built for composure, not comfort. 1 table, 4 chairs, 1 wall screen, 1 water unit, no decor. The council liked rooms that suggested clarity while withholding control. Talk me through the list, she said. June touched the slate and expanded the names. First witness is Vash Iardell, civic representative for the Huron Diaspora Quarter on New Carthage. Second is Bureau Deputy Examiner Tolan Reth. Third is Director Mayran of the Population Recovery Metrics Office. Corinne stopped moving. Mayran is appearing in person? Yes. A gentle tap came at the chamber door. One of the Earth aides stepped in with a sealed case and a tired face. Commander, this just cleared limited access. Some of your corridor records from Kepri and the Oran Belt. Corinne took the case. Limited by whom? By everyone, the aide said. We had to fight for copies. Half the underlying chains are still flagged under Coalition Reconstruction security. Of course they were. June sat across from her. You are looking for something specific. I am looking for what they left out. They left out everything that favors us. Not enough, Corinne said. They left out something they had to hide. June watched her for a moment. You still think the hearing package was filtered from inside? I know it was filtered from inside. I do not know by whom. The wall screen flashed a 5-minute warning before reconvening. Corinne gathered the sheets into 3 categories in under a minute. Transfer cause. Medical burden. Housing denial. She set the last stack aside. It was thin. Too thin. You see it, she said. June leaned in. The denial records. There should be more. If 15 communities petition Earth residency after transfer, there should be at least double that in denied regional placements before transfer. Unless the denials were never recorded as denials. They were recorded as something. Corinne tapped the margin of 1 page where a classification code repeated with minor variations. Deferred stabilization pending productive integration. June read it once and exhaled. That is a holding phrase. It is a burial phrase with better clothes. June seemed to read part of that from her face. We do not need to prove the whole system rotten today. No. We need to prove why Earth intervened. And keep them from locking the zones while the rest unfolds. Corinne nodded. Then that is the line. Selka Vor opened the next phase without ceremony. Witness testimony will now address the relationship between Earth-administered humanitarian support and subsequent residence petitions from liberated civilian populations. Corinne's first response was relief. That frightened her more than the hearing. Relief made people careless. Selka swore Vash Iardell to the chamber and began with neutral questions about his background. Vash answered in a low voice. That carried farther than it sounded like it should. Yes, his people had been relocated after the siege lines broke. Yes, they had spent 41 days in a coalition-holding structure. Yes, they later accepted transport into an Earth-administered district on New Carthage. Yes, after 1 year, many of them petitioned for continued residence under Earth's civil authority. Tarian Sol took over at that point. Representative Vash, he said, did Earth personnel provide your district with upgraded food schedules compared to Coalition's standard rationing? Yes. Did Earth medical teams extend care to chronic patients who were not classified for near-term labor return? Yes. Did Earth allocate permanent housing units to mixed dependency households before regional labor placement was finalized? Yes. Tarian let each answer settle. And after receiving those advantages, your district petitioned to remain under Earth administration. Is that correct? Corinne closed her eyes for one brief second. There it was. Aid made to look like inducement. Survival made to look like bribery. Vash hesitated once. It was enough for Corinne to know he had been prepared by someone before entering the chamber. Yes, he said. A whisper swept the audience tears. Tarian did not press harder. He did not need to. The public version of the story had just been fed. June Sato rose for cross-examination. Representative Vash, why did your district request continued residence under Earth administration? Vash looked toward the Earth Ark only briefly, then back to the dais. Because Earth's systems were stable. Stable in what way? We received regular supply. The shelters were repaired. The children were taught in one place. The air processors stayed functional. June nodded. Was that all? Vash's temple ridges darkened. Among the Hurin, it was a stress sign most species in the hall would miss. Corinne did not miss it. He was holding something back, or being held. I do not know what else the chamber requires, he said. June changed approach. During your time in coalition holding, did you have access to family-preserving housing? Not consistently. Did chronic patients in your district receive long-course treatment approvals? No. Were elderly non-workers marked for delayed placement? Tarian Sol rose halfway from his seat. Objection. Council is leading. Selka considered. Sustained in part. Rephrase. June did not look irritated. Representative Vash, did your community include individuals who could not meet standard productivity thresholds for regional resettlement? Vash was quiet long enough that Corinne felt the shape of the room change around him. Then he answered. Yes. And what happened to them in holding? Some waited. How long? I do not know. Did some of them disappear from daily registration lines? Tarian rose fully this time. Objection. Selka's voice cut across the chamber. Answer only if you have direct knowledge. Vash swallowed. Yes. That one word landed harder than the earlier chain of admissions. June stepped back and let it breathe. Let the room catch up. Did Earth personnel ever tell your people that they must petition for permanent residence in order to receive continued food or shelter? No. Did Earth tell your people that aid would stop if you returned to another system? No. Did anyone from Earth ask you to support Earth political goals in exchange for care? No. June inclined his head. Then why did your district choose to stay? This time Vash looked directly at Corinne. She could not read gratitude in him. Only strain. Because, he said slowly, in the Earth district my people were counted after they failed evaluation, not removed because they failed it. The chamber went very still. Tarian Sol recovered first. Representative Vash, are you suggesting other member systems remove civilians from care because of productivity review? Vash looked back toward the dais. I am saying Earth was the first system my people saw that did not ask what our damaged bodies were worth before deciding whether we would continue to exist. Selka ordered the witness release. Vash was let out without looking toward Earth again. Toland Reth entered with the defensive composure of a bureaucrat who believed procedure could still save him. June pushed him harder than Corinne expected. Examiner Reth, does the Bureau maintain a category called low-yield rehabilitation concern? Toland blinked once. That term appears in legacy modeling language. Does it remain active in placement routing? It appears in archived substructure, not operative policy. Is it attached to dependency-heavy groups with high resource burden? It may appear in historical training matrices. June took up one of the print sheets from the new case. This transfer preclearance from the Laventor ring lists 42 family clusters as deferred stabilization pending productive integration. What does that phrase mean? Toland's answer came too smoothly. It means the households required additional analysis before placement. How long did that analysis take? Variables differ. How long for these 42? I do not have those numbers. June turned another page. Do you have these then? Of the 42 households, 31 were moved by Earth through Emergency Corridor Authority. Of the remaining 11, 6 were deceased within 21 days. Should the chamber understand that your additional analysis continued through death? For the first time, Toland Reth looked toward the Bureau seating bank before answering. Corinne saw it at once. The reflexive search for cover. Selka intervened before the answer fully formed. Council will avoid inflammatory phrasing. June bowed his head slightly. Then I will ask it plainly. Did delay contribute to loss of life in cases Earth later removed from your queue? Toland's jaw tightened. Delay is one variable among many after war. Not a denial. Corinne felt the spectators catch that too. Marin did not wait for a question to frame the issue. The Bureau of Population Recovery was created because compassion without structure kills at scale, he said. The Council recognizes this. Every civilization represented here recognizes this. The question before us is not whether Earth cares. The question is whether Earth has turned care into a governance weapon. There it was. Not an attack on human compassion. An attack on human compassion when organized. Tarian Sol nodded toward him. Director, what happens when one member system offers standards of care far above Coalition norms and contested recovery zones? Mayran folded his hands. Population drift. Administrative distortion. Decline in regional trust. Systems begin to compete for moral legitimacy through unsustainable promises. Once that begins, reconstruction becomes theater rather than recovery. June asked a few questions, but Mayran was ready. He admitted the Bureau used comparative placement models, admitted long-term care load stress recovery budgets, and admitted some systems deprioritized certain dependency profiles when infrastructure was weak. Yet every answer was wrapped in the same premise. Hard choices prevented total collapse. Human exceptions threatened stability. Then he said the line Corinne would remember long after Concord's spindle was behind her. Earth mistakes refusal for virtue. Other members make tragic decisions and continue carrying the whole. Something inside her settled, not flared. It was the calm that came when an argument finally showed its bones. This was not really about numbers. It was about whether the weak were part of the whole at all. The afternoon session adjourned under review lock. No ruling. No relief. But as the delegates rose, Corinne noticed something that had not been there that morning. More than one representative was no longer looking at her as if she had come to defend territorial overreach. Some were looking at her as if they had just realized the hearing might expose something their own systems used every day without naming. It was not enough. Not close. Outside the chamber, the station clocks shifted into evening cycle. Corinne returned to the Earth suite with June and 3 exhausted aides. The room they were given overlooked nothing. Concord's spindle reserved views for power or luxury, never for embattled petitioners. Corinne preferred it that way. Right now she needed walls. One of the aides, Leon Ortega, closed the door and pulled the room into privacy field. Station press is splitting, she said. Some are pushing the dependency angle. Some are focusing on the line from the Huron witness. Which line? Corinne asked, though she already knew. Leon met her eyes. That Earth counted them after they failed. Evaluation? June set his case down. Good line. Dangerous line. Everything true in this hearing is dangerous, Corinne said. A second aide, Paranamps, lifted her wrist display. We got another anonymous packet. More direct this time. Corinne held out her hand. Para transferred the file. It contained 27 internal bureau directives, most heavily redacted, all tied to resettlement efficiency planning. The visible portions were enough to make her jaw clench. Persistent dependency clusters. Resource sink populations. Long-tail care load suppression. Transfer avoidance thresholds. Some terms were old. Some were current. Several carried the authorization marks of offices above Director Mayran. June leaned over her shoulder. Can we authenticate? Not tonight. Can we use any of it tomorrow? Only if we want them to bury us under chain of custody objections. Corinne dropped into a chair and rubbed the bridge of her nose. For the first time all day, she let fatigue reach the surface. Not collapse. Just wait. Then tomorrow has to be about motive, she said. Not proof. June watched her. You are thinking of changing strategy. I am thinking of surviving long enough to make the proof matter. Lien broke the silence. What if we bring in more beneficiary witnesses? Too obvious, June said. They will call it emotional stacking. Then let them. Lien shot back. People are not an emotional trick. No, Corinne said quietly. But the council knows how to say they are. She rose and walked to the wall where the station supplied a blank planning panel. For a long moment she just stared at it. Then she began to write. What did Earth do? Why did Earth do it? What did others refuse? What changed after Earth intervened? What happens if the council shuts the routes? Under that she wrote 3 more lines. Not empire. Not charity theater. Not human exceptionalism. Then the only one that mattered. No one else would keep them alive. June read the panel in silence. That can work. It has to. The danger is that it sounds like moral superiority. Corinne turned to him. Only if I say it about humans. I am going to say it about the people they left waiting. That kept the room quiet. Hours later, after the aides had rotated out to chase authentication leads and line up possible witnesses for the next session, Corinne remained alone with the anonymous file and the printed transfer sheets. Concord Spindle's night cycle dimmed the suite lights automatically, though the station never went dark. Stations that held too much power were afraid of darkness. She pulled out one page from the Laventor file and read a family unit note she had not noticed earlier. Multi-generational. 1 adult non-ambulatory. 2 juveniles. Atmospheric fragility. Placement delayed pending productive integration review. Repeated twice. 3 days later, Earth transfer. Below that, in her own old handwriting from field authorization, a note that barely fit the margin. Keep together. Stabilize first. Sort later. She did not remember writing it. That was what years of triage did. They made your most important decisions feel ordinary until someone tried to criminalize them. Her wrist display lit with an incoming personal line. Not official. Not encrypted through council routing. She accepted with caution. A face appeared in low light. Aaron Vale. Former audit analyst, Earth liaison to coalition records during the Orin campaign, and one of the few people Corinne trusted to be both careful and stubborn. You should not be using open channels, Corinne said. I am not using open channels, Aaron replied. I am using a stupid channel. That is different. Despite everything, Corinne almost smiled. Was it you? With the first packet, yes. With the second, no. That came from deeper. What do you know? Aaron glanced off-screen before answering. The Bureau is not just protecting doctrine. It is protecting budget compacts. Some member systems accepted post-war funding based on reduced long-tail dependency projections. If your model spreads, those projections collapse. Meaning the cost of treating the weak was transferred into silence. Meaning some governments balanced recovery by assuming certain populations would disappear from public burden before anyone had to write that sentence. Corinne closed her eyes once. Can you prove it? Not in a way that survives. Tomorrow morning. Then what good is it? Aaron's expression hardened. The good is that you stop treating this like a misunderstanding. This hearing exists because Earth made an ugly system visible. They need you to look like a sentimental colonizer. He paused just long enough to make the next line land. That is the only way to stop other populations from asking why Earth care made them feel more real than coalition care ever did. Corinne looked back toward the planning wall. Not empire. Not charity theater. What can you get me by morning? She asked. 3 things. Statistical comparison between low-yield routing and Earth retention. Internal language drift from dependency burden to stabilization delay. And 1 partial memo from the Office of War Recovery Finance. Partial is not enough. It is what I can steal without burying myself. She knew then how far the ground had shifted. People were beginning to take risks, not because Earth had already won, but because the hearing had opened a seam in a system many had accepted because it arrived wrapped in necessity. Do it, she said. Aaron nodded. And Corinne? Yes? If they force you into the law question, answer it clean. Do not pretend Earth respected rules that were killing people. The line went dark. Corinne sat alone for another minute, listening to the hum of station air moving through hidden vents. Outside the suite, Concord's spindle kept doing what large institutions always did. It rotated. It processed. It preserved its own image of order. 3 hours later, when she finally lay down on the room's narrow rest platform without undressing, Corinne still did not know whether Earth could win the hearing. But she knew something better than hope. She knew exactly what the Council was afraid of. It was not human force. It was not human fleets. It was not even human politics. It was the possibility that too many species might decide dignity was a practical standard after all. By the second day, the hearing was no longer about numbers alone. Corinne felt that before she even entered the hall. The station traffic feeds had changed tone, the advisory teams had grown, and spectators now arrived early as if they expected damage and did not yet know where it would land. One pattern was becoming harder to hide. Low-yield populations disappeared from coalition queues at nearly the same rate they appeared in Earth corridors, not because Earth stole them, but because Earth was where they went when someone still meant to keep them alive. Before the morning session opened, a council clerk approached and informed June that the order of testimony had been altered. Director Mayoran had requested expanded speaking time. That meant the Bureau wanted to reclaim the frame before Earth could settle a new one. Selka Vor brought the chamber to order under full attendance. Even the higher observer balconies were crowded now. Corinne took her place at the witness platform and noticed that Tarian's soul looked more guarded than he had the day before. Not weaker. Guarded. Selka began with a procedural summary. This chamber will now continue review of whether Earth-administered resettlement practices created improper political dependency among liberated civilian populations. Additional evidentiary context from Bureau oversight and Council member systems will be heard. Director Maran rose first. Then he turned toward Corinne. Earth is admirable in intent, he said. No one questions that. But intent without system becomes favoritism. A member state that extends extraordinary care to highly visible dependency groups in open recovery zones does not merely save lives. It alters political gravity. Others appear cold by comparison even when they carry far larger burdens. That is the central distortion before this chamber. Larger burdens. Corinne had heard that phrase before from commanders who meant larger burdens for fleets, never for the bodies left behind. June stood for cross-examination. Director Maran, is the Bureau's position that a system should reduce care visible to the public in order to avoid moral comparison? No. Is it the Bureau's position that long-term dependents should receive care only when such care does not alter inter-system legitimacy? No. Then define the distortion. Maran folded his hands. The distortion occurs when one actor accepts care obligations that others, in aggregate, cannot sustain, thereby converting relief into political preference. June nodded as if considering a reasonable lecture. Do you distinguish between political preference and trust earned because vulnerable populations survive better under one model than another? I distinguish between governance and sentiment. Corinne saw June's shoulders loosen by a fraction. There it was. The mistake. Maran thought the chamber still trusted that old split. June touched his panel. The center floor lit with a new comparative display. Not the Bureau's charts. Earth's. 3 columns rose into view. Coalition holding. Bureau placement delay. Earth-administered transitional care. Under each, the same categories appeared in plain language rather than policy speech. Elderly non-workers. Chronic injury. Orphan dependence. Multi-household care burden. Atmospheric special needs. Mortality rates followed. A pulse of low noise moved through the chamber. June spoke with ruthless calm. Director, are these categories materially false? Maran took only a heartbeat. They are simplifications. Are they false? They remove infrastructure context. Are they false? Selka allowed the exchange to continue. Maran finally said, no. June stepped closer to the center floor display. Then the chamber can see that the populations most likely to later petition for Earth residence were also the populations most likely to die or vanish in prolonged coalition holding. Does the Bureau dispute that pattern? Maran chose his words carefully. I dispute the implication that pattern reflects intent. Corinne almost smiled. The ground had moved. Yesterday they argued about Earth conduct. Now the Bureau was arguing about intent behind outcomes. That was not victory. It was exposure. June lowered his hand and let the screens hold. Very well. Let us leave intent aside. Do you agree that populations with high dependency burdens were disproportionately delayed in standard placement systems? In some regions under some constraints. Do you agree those same populations survived at higher rates under Earth-administered care? Yes. Do you agree Earth did not require political pledges in exchange for care? We have found no such pledges. Then what precisely is the crime? That Earth fed the people your model could not absorb fast enough? Or that those people later trusted Earth more than the systems that had left them waiting? Selka struck the dais lightly. Council will not editorialize. But the line had already reached the upper balconies. Tarian's soul intervened, voice controlled but sharpened. The concern is not criminality in moral terms. The concern is destabilization. Reconstruction is a shared project. If Earth establishes standards that compel migration by contrast, then Earth is no longer merely participating. It is redefining. That was honest. More honest than most of the hearing. June sat. Selka turned to Corinne. Commander Hale, the chamber will hear from you directly on this point. Did Earth anticipate that its standards of care would attract permanent residence petitions from foreign populations? Corinne did not answer immediately. She let the question reach full shape in the room. Yes, she said. A wave of reaction rolled outward. Good. Let them have the admission. Truth worked better than evasion when the trap expected fear. Selka's eyes narrowed. Then Earth knew its practices would generate political dependency. No, Corinne said. Earth knew its practices would generate survival. Answer the point. I am. Tarion leaned forward. If you knew populations would stay, why continue outside coordinated return channels? Corinne kept her gaze on him. Because coordinated return channels were built for populations likely to recover into labor, tax, and stability projections inside existing systems. The people who came to us were often not that. They were old, damaged, half-healed, breathing on borrowed machinery, carrying children, parents, and injuries that turned every placement model into a cost problem. She kept going, slower now. If we returned them to those channels, many would still be waiting or gone. Missing is speculation, Tarion said. No, Corinne answered. Missing is a category your system uses when the queue outlives the body. That line hit harder than she intended. Several translation panels paused. Before re-rendering it, Selka lifted a hand for quiet. Commander Hale, this chamber recognizes the burden of tragedy. But member systems cannot run civilization on individual moral impulses. Corinne let herself breathe once before replying. Neither can you run civilization by deciding some people count only when they can stand back up fast enough. She saw Mayran turn slightly at that. Not anger. Calculation. It lasted less than an hour. Cyril Den, a recovery advocate from another block, tried to restate the case in softer language. She did not accuse Earth of bribery. She accused Earth of fracture. Many of us rebuilt from ruin, she said. We did so by persuading our populations to trust painful recovery plans because there was no alternative. Then Earth appeared, offering a standard impossible for others to match at scale, and called it humanity. That is not generosity. It is delegitimization. June asked one precise question. Advocate Den, if Earth's standard is impossible to match, why are the populations most drawn to it the ones your own plans classify as long-tail burden groups? Cyril did not blink. Because desperate people choose promises. Even after living under those promises for a year? They choose protection from uncertainty. Protection from what uncertainty? From being moved again. That answer carried just enough truth to be dangerous too. Corinne knew it was one reason many had stayed. No one who had spent months in holding wanted to become transport inventory again. By the end of the second day's formal session, the hearing had grown more complicated in the best and worst ways. Earth had pierced the clean accusation of dependency harvesting, but the opposing blocs were now converging on a stronger charge. Even if Earth had not bribed populations, it had still destabilized shared recovery by creating a rival moral center. When the chamber adjourned, Tarion Sol requested a private conference with Selka, Mayran, and the legal assessors. No Earth representatives were invited. Corinne watched them disappear through the side access, and felt the air leave her chest. A closed alignment meeting meant the upper layers were deciding whether to protect the Bureau, sacrifice the framing, or escalate against Earth altogether. Back in the Earth suite, Leanne Ortega threw her notes onto the table harder than usual. They are moving the ground again. Of course they are, June said. Paranams was already pulling fresh data onto the wall screen. Station Press is now using 3 new phrases. Human shelter expansion. Soft custodial empire. Care state leverage. Corinne sat down, suddenly aware of how much her back hurt. Then they are preparing the public for either sanctions or a controlled compromise. Leanne turned to her. Which do you think? Corinne looked at the room, the tired faces, the strips of data, the half-empty cups, the station wall with no window. I think we are no longer dealing only with the hearing office. Someone above the Bureau has decided that if they cannot prove Earth-bought loyalty, they will prove Earth cannot be allowed to keep earning it. That was when Aaron Vale's promised packet arrived. It came through 3 dead channels and one absurdly legal one, buried inside a request for atmospheric valve maintenance in a lower ring. Para cracked the routing in under a minute and projected the file. The memo was partial. Header damaged. Distribution narrow. But the visible lines were enough. If Earth-administered retention expands among low-yield post-war populations, member state compliance with standardized burden distribution may weaken. Public comparison risk high. Recommendation: review Earth corridor exemptions for politicized care asymmetry. Politicized care asymmetry. There it was. Not proof of murder. Better. Proof of motive. June read it twice. Can we source this? Not safely, Para said. Not before tomorrow. Corinne stood and faced the wall. The memo solved one problem and created another. It revealed the fear clearly. Yet if Earth introduced an illicit partial memo without full chain, the Council could dismiss it and paint Corinne as reckless. Lien spoke first. We do not use the memo. We use the logic. June nodded slowly. We force them to say it in the chamber. Corinne looked at the planning notes from the previous night. Not Empire. Not Charity Theater. No one else would. Keep them alive. Then she added a new line below them. Make them name what they fear. She turned back to the room. Tomorrow we stop defending the corridor. We defend the choice. June frowned slightly. Meaning? Meaning the question is no longer whether people stayed under Earth standards. We admit they did. We explain why. Then we ask the Council whether those people had the right to choose the system that kept them alive. Lien's eyes sharpened. Residence rights. Residence rights with dependency status protections, June said, catching on. If they attack Earth too hard, they have to attack the civilians' choice too. And if they attack that, Corinne said, they stop arguing about administrative fairness and start arguing that the weak should not be allowed to choose the systems that keep them alive. No one in the room spoke for a moment. The plan was dangerous. It moved the hearing from conduct to legitimacy. But that was where the fight had always been, whether the Council admitted it or not. Para broke the silence. We will need witnesses stronger than Vash. Corinne nodded. Not stronger. Clearer. Who? A physician from one of the coalition holding rings. An elder from a transferred household. A parent with a dependent child. Someone who can explain the choice without sounding coached. Lien was already moving. I will see who is still on station. After she left, June remained by the wall screen, hands folded behind his back. If this works, he said, the Council may offer a compromise instead of a ruling. If this works, Corinne replied, they will delay punishment because they are afraid of what a clear punishment would say. That is not the same as justice. No, she said. It is enough to keep the routes open. June looked at her carefully. And if it fails? Corinne met his eyes. Then we make them say, in public, what kind of people they are willing to leave behind. June gave a slow nod. Then we had better make them look small. Long after midnight, the station entered reduced movement cycle. Corinne reviewed testimony plans with the 3 new witnesses who had agreed to appear. None of them were dramatic people. That was good. She did not need drama. She needed clarity that could survive translation. Dr. Sava Merrick had run a medical block in a coalition holding structure above the Kepri Vale before accepting transfer to an Earth-administered clinic on New Carthage. Elder Thurnall was a widowed civic worker from the Leth diaspora who had lost both mobility and oxygen resilience after a refinery strike. Mara Quen was not human despite the name. Her species used sound clusters Earth translators rendered into approximate human phonetics. She was a mother of 2 who had spent 9 weeks in holding with a damaged son before Earth corridor transport reached her sector. Corinne told each of them the same thing. Do not try to prove Earth noble. Tell them what happened. Tell them what you feared. Tell them what changed. Dr. Merrick nodded. Elder Thurnall just looked tired. Mara Quen asked one question. If they say I am too emotional? Answer clearly anyway, Corinne said. By the time the preparation ended, her voice was rough and her body felt like old armor. She lay down again on the narrow platform and stared at the dim ceiling. She did not know if the next session would save the routes. She did know one thing. The Council had spent 2 days trying to prove that human care distorted politics. Tomorrow she intended to prove something worse. That the distortion began the moment someone treated care for the weak as optional. Selka Vor announced that the chamber would hear limited supplemental witness testimony related to residence choice and dependency support. The wording itself revealed strain. 2 days earlier, the hearing had been about Earth conduct. Now it had to admit that the civilian's choice mattered. Tarian Sol objected before the first witness was called. The issue is administrative distortion, not sentimental preference. Corinne heard the public line inside that. If they could label the witnesses sentimental, they could make experience sound unserious. Selka overruled him with visible reluctance. The chamber will hear testimony relevant to motive for residence petitions. Dr. Sava Merrick came first. June led him carefully. Dr. Merrick, state your role during the Kepri Vale recovery. I directed medical triage and holding Ring 7 for 43 days. What kinds of civilians did you see most delayed in placement? Those with layered burden. chronic injury, respiratory damage, dependent children, elders. Any case that could not be returned to labor or independent function quickly. Why were they delayed? Because placement systems required hosts. Hosts evaluated resource load. Did Earth receive these cases? Yes. Often after delay became dangerous. June stepped aside. Tell the chamber what changed when Earth took them. Merrick looked toward the tiers, then back at Selka as if choosing the most stable point in the room. Earth built care backward from need. Others built placement forward from capacity. That is the simplest way to say it. A current ran through the hall. Terrian Sol took his cross-examination without raising his voice. Dr. Merrick, is it not true that all systems must account for capacity? Yes. Then Earth merely had more excess. No, Merrick said. Earth had different refusal points. Terrian stilled. Explain. In Ring 7, a child with long oxygen dependence and a non-ambulatory grandparent counted as a difficult cluster. Under Earth intake, the same household counted as a family. That line spread through the chamber in delayed waves, translation after translation. Corinne kept her face still. That was exactly what she needed. Not praise for Earth. Difference named in terms anyone could follow. Terrian tried to recover the ground. Did Earth not benefit administratively when such families later chose Earth residents? Merrick did not hesitate. Earth benefited morally first. Administratively second. Some spectators laughed softly, not out of mockery but recognition. Selka silenced them. Elder than all followed. June asked the clearest question first. Why did you stay under Earth administration? Byrne did not look at Earth while answering. Because the first system asked whether I could work again. Earth asked whether I could breathe through the next winter cycle. There it was again. Clean. Clear. Impossible to reduce to policy language. Terrian Sol changed tactics. Elder All, were you aware that by staying under Earth governance you weakened your original sector's recovery numbers? Byrne lifted his burned face toward the dais. I was aware that returning to my original sector would likely have ended my life. Recovery numbers would have survived me. Even Selka did not interrupt that answer. Mara Quinn came last. June kept his questions almost brutally simple. How long were you in holding? 9 weeks. What was your son's condition? Lung damage from ash storms after the refinery strike. What happened in holding? We waited for placement. We were told the case was complex. What happened when Earth transport arrived? They took both my children, my mother, and me together. Did anyone from Earth ask for political support? No. Why did you later choose Earth residence? Mara adjusted the therapy tube at her son's neck before answering. Because Earth was the first authority that treated my child as part of the future rather than an expensive reminder of the past. The chamber did not erupt. It compressed. Corinne felt it in the way bodies stopped moving and screens stopped shifting. The Council's strongest defense had always been distance. These witnesses reduced distance faster than policy ever could. Then the higher layer struck back. A sealed signal flashed across the dais. Selka looked down, listened through an internal feed, and her posture changed almost imperceptibly. Not surprise. Reception. The Office of Postwar Continuity, she said, has requested standing intervention. There it was. The upper tier. Coral Ven's voice was deep and almost gentle. That made him more dangerous than Terrian or Mayran. The Continuity Office has listened with care, he said. No one in this chamber doubts Earth's compassion. But member civilization order cannot be revised ad hoc through local moral preference. If every species adopts independent care thresholds detached from shared recovery doctrine, then all post-war distribution breaks. We sympathize with suffering. We cannot permit each case of suffering to rewrite civilization. Corinne understood the move at once. This was no longer a hearing about whether Earth had acted improperly. It was an attempt to recast the entire question as a threat to order. June rose. Is the Continuity Office arguing that vulnerable populations may not choose residents under systems that better protect them? Coral Ven did not answer directly. We are arguing that member systems cannot be coerced into illegitimacy by comparison. There. Very close to the memo language. Not enough to expose motive as text. Enough to expose motive as instinct. Corinne asked for leave to address the chamber directly. Selka hesitated, then granted it. She spoke slowly because speed made people sound defensive. Then let us name the choice clearly, she said. The chamber has heard that Earth corridors accepted civilians others delayed. It has heard that Earth did not require pledges or service in exchange for care. It has heard that those who stayed did so because they survived better under Earth standards. She kept her tone flat and clear. So if the Continuity Office says this outcome threatens order, what it is really saying is that vulnerable people should not be allowed to choose the systems that keep them alive if that choice embarrasses systems that would not. Noise broke across the upper hall. Selka struck the dais for order, but Corinne continued before interruption could harden. This is not a border seizure case. Earth did not take fleets. Earth did not annex worlds. Earth fed the elderly, housed the injured, treated children with long recovery, and kept households together. If that creates loyalty, it is not because humans bought devotion. It is because the people who came to us understood the difference between being managed and being kept alive. Coral then answered before Selka could. You reduce macro-civilization to individual injury. I reduce nothing, Corinne said. You abstract people until they fit your balance sheets. A legal assessor objected. Selka half raised her hand. Then Tarian's soul did something unexpected. He did not defend the Continuity Office. He asked a real question. Commander Hale, he said, if every system adopted Earth-level dependency protection tomorrow, some would collapse under the cost. Do you deny that? No. The honesty rippled through the hall. Tarian held her there. Then what do you ask of this chamber? Corinne knew this was the hinge. Not a speech about human virtue. A demand clear enough to survive the record. I ask the chamber to stop calling residents by the weak political distortion when it is plainly a rational choice for survival. I ask the chamber to preserve corridor exemptions while member systems review the effect of dependency weighting in their recovery models. And I ask the chamber to recognize a basic principle. No liberated civilian should be forced back into a system that has already tagged their household as an unsustainable burden while another lawful system is willing to keep that household alive. Silence followed. Not approval. Wait. Coral then conferred with the legal specialists beside him. Director Mehron's face had gone flatter than before. Tarian's soul no longer looked certain he wanted a quick ruling. Selka Vor called for recess, and withdrew the dais under sealed consultation. That was the moment when the hall ceased to be a hearing chamber, and became what it always was underneath. A battlefield where the weapon was whose language survived into the record. Corinne returned to the Earth suite shaking from delayed adrenaline. Lien shut the door and stared at her. You just turned this into a residents' rights fight. It already was. Yes, Lien said. But now they cannot pretend otherwise. Para pulled incoming feeds onto the wall. Station press was moving faster than the council could contain. Clips of Merrick. Clips of Thurn. Clips of Mara Quen with her son. Clips of Corinne saying Earth fed the elderly and kept households together. Clips of Corovan saying civilization could not be rewritten by cases of suffering. The contrast was doing what evidence alone never could. It was forcing audiences to hear the values inside the language. June sat heavily in a chair for the first time all day. They will offer a procedural compromise. Or sanctions wrapped as review, Para said. Corinne stood by the planning wall, reading and rereading the lines she had written nights ago. Make them name what they fear. She had done that. Perhaps too well. Lien's station display chimed with a secure alert. You have a request, she said, looking up in surprise. Private meeting. Tarian soul. June was on his feet at once. Decline. Corinne held out a hand. Read the terms. Lien scanned the note. No recording. No legal admission. 1 advisor each. June's expression turned grim. He wants to measure whether Earth will settle. Corinne thought of the routes. Thought of the witnesses. Thought of the possibility that the Council's upper tiers might still force a public rebuke if they believed Earth could be made to accept guilt in exchange for corridor survival. I will hear him, she said. The meeting room Tarian chose was small, neutral, and windowless even by station standards. He arrived with 1 advisor and no visible security. Corinne brought June. No one sat at first. Tarian spoke without preamble. You are making it impossible to rule cleanly. That sounds like a problem for those who built an unclean system. His mouth twitched, perhaps at the bluntness, perhaps at himself for walking into it. Do not waste this meeting on chamber lines. I know what you are doing. I am asking whether Earth wants vindication or access. Corinne had expected the question. She hated that it was honest. Earth wants the routes open, she said. And the residents protected. Tarian nodded once. Then listen carefully. There are blocs in the Council willing to suspend action and authorize an independent review of dependency weighting and post-war placement. They will not do it if Earth keeps framing this as civilizational indictment. June answered before she could. If the Council wanted soft language, it should have avoided hard facts. Tarian ignored him. If Earth forces an explicit moral ruling, the Continuity Office will close ranks. They will sacrifice some bureau doctrine later if needed. But first they will discipline the actor who embarrassed the system in public. Corinne met his gaze. And if Earth accepts a review without moral clarity, the bureau stalls while my routes die by audit. Not if route protection is part of the settlement. Settlement. There was the word. No clean victory then. A negotiated bruise. Tarian finally sat, and after a moment Corinne did too. Why are you here? She asked. Truly? He took longer to answer than she expected. Because I still believe in ordered recovery. But I also heard enough in that chamber to know the Bureau let metrics become a shield. And because if this hearing ends in blunt punishment, half the frontier will read it as proof that the Council values administrative dignity more than living civilians. That was not friendship. It was worse and more useful. It was alignment born from self-preservation and a late brush with conscience. What is the offer? Corinne asked. He laid it out with the precision of a man negotiating ship fuel in wartime. Temporary protection for existing Earth corridor exemptions. No new corridor expansion without filed notice. Independent review commission on dependency weighting and residence denial patterns. Provisional right for currently settled households to maintain residence while review proceeded. No formal finding of political dependency against Earth. In return, Earth would avoid language of systemic cruelty in the closing session and frame its outcome, if any, as a shared need for moral correction rather than moral collapse. June's expression could have cut steel. You want Earth to rescue the Council from its own exposure. Tarian did not disagree. Corinne looked at the table between them. It was the oldest question in politics. Take the partial life. Leave the clean sentence unsaid. Keep people breathing. Let history judge later, if history ever cared enough to read the file. What if we refuse? She asked. Then I do not know, Tarian said. Which means the people above me will decide. You will not like their instincts. Corinne let the silence sit between them and asked herself only one question. What outcome leaves the greatest number of vulnerable households alive 6 months from now? The answer was ugly. It was also clear. We take the structure, she said. We fight the language. June folded his arms. Meaning? Meaning no confession. No apology. No acceptance of dependency charges. We accept review, protected residence, and corridor continuity. And in the closing session I say exactly enough truth that they cannot call this a misunderstanding. Lien exhaled sharply when she heard it later. That is not justice. No, Corinne said. It is a door left open. By dawn, the terms were still not final, the Council still divided, and the station still vibrating with rumor. Corinne had slept less than 2 hours, but the fear inside her had changed shape again. It was no longer fear of losing the argument. It was fear of winning the only kind of victory institutions usually allowed. A necessary one. A partial one. A victory that saved lives and left the machine standing. She hated it. She would take it anyway. Selka Vor returned to the dais with the legal assessors and announced that the chamber had completed interim consultation pending formal review. The wording was careful enough to reveal compromise before the substance appeared. Tarian Soul did not look at Corinne. Director Mayran did, once, and then not again. Coral Ven was absent. The Continuity Office had retreated behind procedure after failing to keep the issue abstract. Selka read the findings in the measured cadence of someone trying to make a force-turn sound plan from the beginning. The Chamber finds insufficient basis, at present, to sustain the claim that Earth-administered reconstruction zones knowingly conditioned humanitarian support on political pledges or coerce residents through deprivation. That line alone changed the room. Not enough. Important. The Chamber further recognizes evidence that differential survival outcomes among dependency-heavy civilian populations may have materially influenced subsequent residents' petitions toward Earth-administered jurisdictions. Differential survival outcomes. A bloodless phrase for the heart of the hearing. Corinne accepted it because institutions rarely said the truest thing first. In light of concerns raised regarding post-war placement doctrine, the Council authorizes an independent review of dependency weighting, delayed stabilization categories, and residence denial patterns across coalition-administered recovery systems. There. The first crack in the wall. Selka continued. Pending review, existing Earth humanitarian corridor exemptions will remain active under temporary continuation protocols. Civilian households presently under Earth-administered Reconstruction Authority may retain current resident status without forced retransfer during the review period. Only then did Corinne let herself breathe fully. Not victory. Not clean victory. But the routes lived. The household stayed. The Bureau would be dragged into review under public attention rather than private burial. Selka was not done. The Chamber also finds that Earth must provide transparent notice of any future corridor expansion in shared recovery zones and submit population retention data for comparative oversight. That was the price. Expected. Manageable. Then came the political shield. This chamber urges all member systems to avoid rhetoric that converts humanitarian variance into civilizational accusation while review is ongoing. Rhetoric. As if the hearing had not been built from rhetoric from the first hour. As if words were the danger rather than what words had revealed. June leaned toward Corinne without moving his lips. They are trying to spread blame across the room. Let them, she whispered back. The residents still stay. Protocol gave Earth a final response window. Selka offered it in the tone of a courtesy she could no longer avoid. Commander Hale, you may address the chamber briefly. She did not thank the Council. Gratitude would have turned the moment into benevolence. She did not attack the Council either. That would have made the compromise easier to dismiss as human indignation. She chose the narrow line she had planned through the night. Earth accepts continuation of the corridors and the review, she said. Not as a favor, but as recognition that the question before this chamber was never as simple as influence. People moved toward Earth because they survived there. Households remained under Earth administration because they were allowed to remain households. The review should begin from those facts. The translators carried her words up the tiers. We do not claim that war left easy choices for any civilization. It did not. But this hearing has shown something that should matter to all of us. When vulnerable civilians repeatedly choose one system over another, the first question should not be how to punish the system they chose. The first question should be what they were trying to escape. No one moved. Even the press banks held still. Corinne let the next line come without force. If that question makes established systems uncomfortable, then discomfort is not the problem. The chamber did not erupt. It settled. The way a structure settles after taking a crack that does not bring it down, but will never let it bear weight quite the same way again. Selka closed the session. The dais lights dimmed. Delegates rose in clusters, already carrying the ruling into 1,000 private calculations. Terrian Soul finally looked at Corinne across the narrowing gap and inclined his head once, almost too slightly to count. She returned nothing. She did not know whether he had helped because he believed some part of her case or because he feared what open punishment would do to frontier legitimacy. Either way, the routes were alive. Motive could be sorted later. Back in the Earth suite, no one celebrated immediately. The first work was ugly, practical, and urgent. Confirm the corridor continuation language. Verify resident protections were entered in the chamber archive. Send route security updates to New Carthage, Kepri Line, Oran Belt, and the smaller satellite districts that would hear rumors before law. Warn administrators that oversight packets would now multiply. Tell field teams the routes held. Tell them nothing more yet. Only after the first wave of secured dispatches left did Lien sink into a chair and laugh once in exhaustion. I hate partial wins. So do I, Corinne said. Para looked up from her panel. You know what the first reaction feed from the frontier says? No. Para read it anyway. Earth did not win because it was stronger. Earth won because the Council could not say out loud that some families should have died quietly. The room went still. June removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. That is the public version now. No forced transfers. Corinne sat down abruptly, not from weakness but from the sudden absence of one kind of tension leaving room for another. She had spent days holding the possibility of failure inside her body so tightly that relief felt like injury. Lien handed her a cup of water. You should sleep. In a minute. You have been saying that for 3 days. In a minute, Corinne repeated. The private line on her wrist display lit again. Aaron Vale. She accepted. His face appeared under bad light and no sleep. Congratulations, he said. You embarrassed an institution into caution. That is not the same as reform. No. But people inside the Bureau are already panicking over the review language. That means records will start moving. Quietly. Some to protect themselves. Some to bury others. You sound pleased. I am practical, Aaron said. Also a little pleased. Corinne almost smiled. Almost. Can the review be useful? Yes. If Earth staffs it with auditors rather than politicians. And if you understand the next fight starts now. I do. Aaron studied her through the low-quality feed. How many asked for Earth standards after the ruling? Too soon to know. It will rise. Yes. And that will bring a second backlash. Yes. He nodded. Good. You are still awake. The line closed. June came to stand beside her. Either spoke at first. Finally he said, You know they will keep calling it variance instead of neglect. Yes. And dependency waiting instead of abandonment. Yes. And temporary continuation instead of correction. Yes. He folded his hands behind his back. Then why do you look disappointed? We kept the routes. Corinne watched a cargo train move along the arm beyond the glass, small against the scale of the station. Because the machine survives by changing its adjectives. June considered that. So do people. She turned toward him. That was almost optimistic. It was meant as an insult to everyone equally. That got a real smile from her at last. They stood together in silence a little longer. Then a movement near the public bench line caught her eye. Mara Quen was there with both children now, the younger one sleeping against her shoulder, the older one tracing patterns on the bench with a blunt stylus. She had not noticed Corinne yet. She was simply sitting in the station light as though a hearing that had bent half the council had never been about her life. Corinne hesitated, then crossed the gallery. Mara looked up and rose halfway before Corinne stopped her. Please don't. Mara settled again. They told us the routes stay open. They do. And they cannot move us back now? Not during the review. Mara lowered her eyes to her younger son. That is enough for now. Enough for now. The most honest victory speech Corinne had heard all week. The older child looked at Corinne with open curiosity. Are you the one from the chamber? Corinne nodded. Yes. He thought about that. You looked angry. I was. Did you win? Corinne glanced at Mara, then back at him. We kept some people safe. The child accepted that answer with the seriousness children sometimes reserve for adults they have not yet decided whether to trust. When Corinne returned to the suite later, another packet of messages had arrived from the frontier. One from District 14 on New Carthage made her stop. We informed the residents. No cheering. Mostly crying. Then the old kitchen team started cooking extra. We think that is their version of cheering. Corinne sat at the table and read that line 3 times. At the departure concourse, Tarian's soul approached without entourage. June stiffened beside her, but Corinne did not move. Tarian stopped at diplomatic distance. The review will be ugly. So was the hearing. Yes. He held her gaze. For what it is worth, Commander Hale, I still think Earth risks destabilizing systems that cannot bear your model. Corinne answered without heat. Then they should learn what their systems are built on. He absorbed that, then gave a slow nod. Perhaps some will. Perhaps. It was more than she had expected from him. After he left, June muttered, I remain committed to disliking him. That seems wise. Earth's shuttle detached from Concorde's spindle under routine traffic clearance. No honors. No escort fanfare. Just a vessel leaving a station that had almost turned care into a chargeable offense. Corinne strapped into her seat and finally allowed herself to feel the full exhaustion of the week. The cabin. Lights dimmed for transit. Through the port she could see the station shrinking, ring by ring, against the old blue star. Concorde's spindle looked serene from a distance. They all did. Lien's voice came from the seat behind her. First update from New Carthage Central Schools. Corinne turned. What is it? Lien smiled without much strength. They asked if they should add council civics to the next term. Apparently, the older students want to understand how a government can be wrong while still believing it is saving everyone. Corinne leaned back and closed her eyes. Tell them yes. Anything else? She thought for a moment. Then she opened her eyes again and looked at the shrinking station beyond the port. Tell them to teach one more thing, she said. Teach them that when a system asks what the weak are worth, that is the moment to start asking what the system is worth. No one in the cabin answered right away. The engines deepened around them. The shuttle turned for the first gate window home. Corinne Hale had not beaten the Galaxy Council in the way stories like to pretend such things happened. She had not shattered the dais, forced confessions from every architect of the old model, or burned the machine down. She had kept a door open. And somewhere behind her, on a station built from procedure and polished language, the record now held one truth the Council had tried very hard not to say plainly. The people who moved toward Earth were not moved by manipulation. They moved toward the place where someone still meant for them to live. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think, or if it reminded you why human stories still matter even among the stars, please like this video, share it with someone who would feel its weight, and subscribe to the channel for more science fiction stories where humanity is tested, underestimated, and never easily broken.